Materials are not only the things that bring colour to your game environment, but also texture. They are mechanisms by which you make virtual objects look like the real thing. A material defines the final appearance of an object, including its colour, shininess, roughness, and even how light interacts with it. The full extent of materials is a bit of a rabbit hole for another day, but for now I'm going to show you how to just colour the objects that we've already got into our scene. So to create a material, you'll come into your assets folder. Now you might also want to create a folder in here, so just go right click, create folder that we'll call materials, just to keep things organized. Then go into that folder and right click again, create, and we'll go material. So that will create a material. Let's call this red. That's probably the easiest one to create right now. And with that set, when you come over to the inspector, you're going to see this kind of view here with a shader, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you will see that the shader actually does say Universal Render Pipeline. If you remember back when we started this, we started with a URP or Universal Render Pipeline project. And as I explained very quickly back then, Unity has a whole bunch of different ways of actually rendering stuff and doing all that kind of thing. And we chose the URP. So for now, what we're just going to do is going to come down to this surface inputs and have a look at this base map. There's this big white square, and this is actually the color that we're going to set for it. Click on it and you'll get this color wheel come up, and we can just select like a red there. Now you'll get a preview of the material down in the inspector that's going to look like that, and you can actually see the way that light will interact with it as well. At the moment we're not quite concerned about that, we just want to color an object in the scene. So we've set that to a red color and we'll close that. Now we go back down into our project, we get hold of our red material, and we can actually click and drag it in with the left mouse button onto different objects. So you can see I'm not releasing the mouse button just yet. When it hits the object you want to be that material, you can release it. So our sphere is now red. In the hierarchy, if you click on the sphere, have a look in the inspector, and you'll see down the bottom that the red material has been assigned to it. And you can now see all the different options in there. Mainly the red color that we set for it. So now we've influenced the color, we also want to influence a little bit of the texture. To get textures is quite complicated in a material, but a real quick way we can do this is to get some images that have already been created. Now, if we go to a website called textures.com, you can actually create yourself an account here and subscribe to it. Unfortunately, it used to be free, but now it's not. But still, there's some free assets on here. So we can log in and then we'll go and have a look at the free content. So click on the free that's at the top. What you're looking for is a sphere like this, which has a texture on it. When we create textures in games, we kind of like represent them in a sphere because it kind of shows how the light is going to fall on them. So when you're in here, find something you like the look of, and it doesn't really matter what it is at this point because this is a really quick and easy one. I'm going to go with this cliff layered. We'll select that, and then we'll have a look down underneath it, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of different images. Now these are textures, and these textures do different things in the material itself. So we've modified the color, but the actual color of a texture can also be defined through the albedo that you can see just here. So it's showing you a rock kind of color, and if you go up to this surface here, you'll see the same colors in there. We're going to download this one. So you want to pick a version of it. Let's just go with 512 by 512 and just click on download and allow that to download. So I've got it downloaded there. Okay, I'll just shut that and we'll just go back into Unity. Now with that particular texture, I'm going to get it from my downloads and drag and drop it into my materials folder. So you can see it next to the red material. And then the red material, which is on the sphere, which is still showing up in the inspector here, we want to use that texture as the base map. Now you drag that and drop it just into that spot there next to the base map. You'll now see it's been applied to the surface, and the red has also still been applied to the surface. Let's see if I can get rid of that. Okay, I want to get rid of those crosshairs. So now you can see that you've got that base map applied and red is also applied to it. If we go back into our inspector to our color, so our red, if we were to change that red down to white, we end up with the actual color of the image that we downloaded. Now it might not look exactly the same because of the way that the light in the 3D scene is actually falling on it, but when you put white color on top of a texture, you're not actually changing it whatsoever. So the color you've got in the scene is pretty close to the color that you downloaded from textures.com, because that's all it's got to work on when you've set your base map color to 0. So at this point, let's go back into textures.com for the same texture, which is this cliffy rock face or whatever one you chose. And we're going to download all of the other textures. So there's a seamless height texture, there's a seamless normal texture, there's a seamless roughness texture, and there's a seamless ambient occlusion. So grab all of those at the same resolution that you did before. So I picked 512 by 512. So I'll just make sure that I've got all those. And then we're going to go back into Unity and actually use them all. So in Unity, let's go and have a look in here. In our material, there's a whole bunch of other textures we can add. There's a metallic map, there's a normal map, height map, and an occlusion map. Now the metallic map, you'll see that there is a smoothness setting that you can set and also a metallic value as well. The normal map has nothing associated with it, neither does the height map or the occlusion map. Now, let's bring all of those different textures in. So I'm just going to grab all of those, if I can, from my downloads folder. So let's drag and drop those images that you can see now there from my folder into the Unity Materials folder. When you're creating lots and lots and lots of different textures and that, you will want to have separate folders for all of them. In this case, I'm just putting them all into materials so that we can find them quite easily. To apply all these images, let's go back to our sphere, which is just here, and we're going to go down to the material at the bottom. And we've got a base map that we've already applied. I've set the color to white. Yours might be red, that's okay. And we'll have a look at the normal map. Now, a normal map is very distinct from any other map that you will get because it's going to be blue. So if we have a look at the images I've got, there's this blue one here. So we know that's a normal map. Now, the normal map, I'm going to grab that and drag it across into the normal map. The normal map, it basically defines how light is going to interact with the surface of an object. Now, as soon as I've added that, you can see quite clearly, or kind of you can, if I sort of like focus on that and just look around it, it's now got some kind of depth in it that it didn't have before because of the normal map. So the normal map is quite important for that. And if you only ever have one other map other than albedo assigned to a texture, the normal map is very important. We can talk about that down the track. For now, just know that it's very much about it. Now, when you also put a normal map into Unity, you might get this message over here that says this texture is not marked as a normal map, because Unity wants to know that it is a normal map. So just click on Fix Now and that will fix it for you. And it even gives you better definition here. So the thing about materials that I'll bring up is that materials are, or this sphere, I should say, it's smooth, it's round, it's a perfect sphere. It's the materials that we're putting on it that make it look like it's not perfect. If you have a look at the green lines around it, which are essentially its collider, they're nice and smooth. They're a smooth sphere. But if you look closer, you can see all of the crevices in that, because it's basically an optical illusion. So materials allow you to have an optical illusion where you don't have the kind of geometry in the scene to give you sort of roughness over the surface. Okay, so we've got our normal map. We also have a height map and occlusion map. Now, we downloaded those as well. So it's a matter of just finding those. The last one here is roughness, which we'll get to in a moment. If I click on that, I can see by the name of it that it's a height map. So I'm going to grab that across. Whoop. So I'm going to go to the sphere and set the height map in here to that one there. And I also have an occlusion map, which will be this one here as well, which I'll drag across. So bring that across there as well. And finally, we will also bring across this final map here, which will be our metallic map in Unity. And let's drag that across in there, but it's actually a roughness map, because if you think about things that are metallic, they're shinier. And so when you add that map in, you can actually define which parts are shiny and which parts aren't. So if we change the metallic map to like the smoothness, you can actually see how you can make it really shiny or not, depending on the values that are in that particular image. While you've been applying all these different maps, you might not have noticed the difference that you get when you add them in. And it's quite substantial. And there's a few that, you think you might be able to leave them out, which would be okay in some particular instances for games, because each of these maps takes extra processing as far as the final rendering product goes. But first of all, let's have a look. We had albedo, which is the first one. That just gives you the color. Now, you can also multiply this with another color. We did initially with red and change it completely. The next that I would consider the most important would be the normals. And the normals give you that depth value. And you can see the normal here, how it's suddenly given you kind of more shadowing and a different sort of depth and height values within that particular image. Then we have the height map. And the height map can actually change the virtual physical height, I guess, of the object that's being drawn to make it look even more high and low in different areas and give you way more texture. Now, in this case, there's not a lot of difference between the normal and the height map, but just a little bit. But it again depends on the object that you're trying to render. Then we have the occlusion map. The occlusion map is something that gives you this, I guess, kind of fake shadowing. We haven't covered shadowing yet, but a fake shadowing is more of an interpretation of how something should be textured and shadowed around the edges, which is a much cheaper way programmatically and processor-wise than figuring out where actual shadows are. And it can create depth in an object, or a sort of fake depth, if you like. Then, last but not least, we have the map that makes the biggest difference. And this was the roughness map that we downloaded, and we used it as the metallic channel. And it's the metallic channel that really determines how shiny or rough an object actually appears on the screen. And you saw that when we applied it. And you can see that on the screen now. It's just how much shinier you've made that sphere appear. If you think about it, it's just a sphere. It's very smooth and round, but you've been able to change its whole look and feel just by adding all of these different textures. And this is the power that materials have. But don't underestimate materials and what they actually are. They're very, very complex programmatic objects. But we'll get to that in later tutorials. Just for now, appreciate just how vibrant and amazing these actual materials have made this very, very simple sphere appear. And if you've been following along with the last lot of tutorials and you've got different shapes, do try other free textures from textures.com to see just how different you can make your objects appear.